Hails, minions and mortals, this is Fang von Rathenstein, lead singer of the most metal band on earth, the Lords of the Trident, and we are running 7 live streams every single month, including full band concerts, solo guitar shred sessions, and even classic Sega CD game playthroughs. So head on over to youtube.com/Lords of the Trident and twitch.tv/Lords of the Trident and subscribe. We've got a Patreon too, so check that out. Do it quick before Andy realizes he played the Lords ad and not the Lord ad.
Hey, welcome back to my little show. Before we kick into it, you know what I'm going to say, Patreon. Come and join me on Patreon, patreon.com/Andy Dowling. It is the best way to support this podcast, and support starts from only $1 a month. That is my goal for this year, is to get as many $1 supporters as possible. The more I get, obviously, the better it's going to be, but it's the ultimate accountability piece, the ultimate motivator. It keeps me fired up. It's the reason, Patreon is the reason why this podcast exists in 2021, and it's the reason why there's 2 episodes a week, firing on all cylinders. I'm absolutely loving it. It's because of the Patreon community. There are additional tiers there if you want access to the Patreon podcast each week, or giveaways and free stuff. There's a whole bunch of stuff over there. So go over to patreon.com/Andy Dowling. Hey, it's another episode of the Andy Social Podcast. In fact, it's episode 294 of my little show, and my guest is frontman James Delbridge of the Canadian metal band Lycanthro, and they've got a new album coming out on the 4th of June called Mark of the Wolf. You can listen to their single out now called Crucible on all the streaming platforms, and of course I'll have links in the show notes. You can check it all out. Go and support them on Bandcamp and Big Cartel, lycanthro.bigcartel.com and lycanthro.bandcamp.com. Lots of links. I'll dump everything in the show notes, of course, over at andysocial.net and andydowling.net. But enough crapping on from me. Please enjoy this great chat with James Delbridge. You really give me a run for my money with the amount of PR, promo stuff, the hustle. Like, you're just constantly, like, every time I'm, like, turning on my phone, like in the morning, I'm having a look to see what's going on the socials, and you're popping up and you're just going hard. And I mean, it must be exciting sort of leading up to this album where you get to talk about it so much.
Yeah, dude, it's been like, it's funny. It's been really like, I've been ripping my hair out, but like in the best possible way though, because I haven't promoted an album in a few years. Like, our last release was in 2018. And even back then I was much younger and I didn't even know what PR was. So we didn't promote it as well last time. So over the intervening years, I've been like learning more and more, and I've just been trying to implement all of that into promoting this album. And it's been really difficult. Like, it's been fun, but I will say there's definitely been a little bit of a benefit, because here in Canada, we're still in lockdown right now, which again, obviously it sucks, but at the same time, I've been able to dedicate most of the hours in the day to promoting this album and doing everything on the socials and all that stuff. So yeah, it's been fun, but it's been very, very challenging. So
I did a similar thing, probably not to the extent that you're doing, because the thing that I love about what you're doing is a lot of video stuff as well. And so you're really sort of putting yourself out there as the guy from the band, as yourself, to sort of really validate and talk about the release, which I think is really cool. That's something that I don't do at all. And I kind of would like to, but I think every time I see my face, I just go, oh man, I can't handle it. I can't handle it, man. But, but one thing that, like, I experienced just doing our last release and leading up to that is, like, just every day, just that's all I'm doing. I'm talking about it. I'm just, trying to find new ways to spread the word and do it in a really sort of, try to do it in an organic way, so people aren't sort of turned off by what you're doing, and you're trying to find creative ways of just getting the word out. And eventually, and just be careful, man, like, once you hit that release date, it's going to be an amazing sort of moment, because you're going to be able to tick that off the list and go, hey, we did it. But just don't crash and burn afterwards. Oh my God, I did it myself, and I was just so exhausted, and I didn't even know I was exhausted until afterwards, when it all just caught up with me, and I just went, oh my God, like, what did I just put myself through?
Yeah, for sure, man. But one thing that I also do know is that even after the release date comes out, there's still a lot of work to be, at least for our stuff, there's a lot of work to be done after the fact as well, because one thing that we were planning on doing, which at this moment in time probably not going to happen when I wanted it to happen, was we wanted, as you were mentioning, like I've been trying to do a lot more video content and all that, and we were going to film a big production music video for the lead single, Crucible. We were gonna release a couple of singles. We have our next single coming out, maybe next week. Maybe it just depends on when our PR guy John Asher. Well, the video is not done yet. It should be done by the end of the week, but it depends on how fast he can get some website to premiere it and stuff like that. But my guess will be like late next week, I think. But that video was just like one of those vocal playthrough videos mixed with a lyric video, kind of like what Beast in Black did for the Born Again video. You've seen that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's similar to that, but we were going to do a big production music video for Crucible, and I wanted to do that at the end of this month, but that's what I mean by, like, with the financial situation at the moment and the COVID situation here as well, we are going to have to do that afterwards, because there's it's expensive, and we don't have we have money obviously from selling merch and pre-orders and all that, but we can't spend any of that yet, obviously, because of the shipping and all that stuff. So and for this video, we can't shoot it this month because we're supposed to be coming out of lockdown next week, but I've been hearing rumblings around here that they might be extending it, which is pissing everybody off over here. But so it's been a lot of the things that we've wanted to do has been kind of hindered by COVID over here. So we've just been trying to find ways to adapt and find ways to get all the content out there in a way that still looks professional and looks good, while at the same time, not for what we can do, like from what we're able to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's a really tough thing. I mean, that a lot of bands are going through, and unfortunately, like for you guys in the Northern Hemisphere, a lot of parts of the world, still sort of in the midst of lockdowns, and the worst thing that you can do is to put yourself out there in a way that people understand, like you're using that as a reason as to why you can't do what you do. And I think just on the surface, like when I look at the way that you promote the band and you're putting everything out there leading up to this release, you wouldn't even know you guys are in a lockdown, apart from sort of, just obviously sort of anecdotal sort of comments here and there, but you're not using it as a lens over the entire project, the entire release, the entire campaign, because I think that would just turn people off. And I think what you said earlier, one of those things in looking at the situation, having the extra time where you are at lockdown, we can do all this PR, you can do all this promo stuff, has been an advantage. So I guess it's just a case of constantly looking at the situation, going, how can I make the most of this situation, even if it's not perfect or it's not the ideal path? What can I do to really make the most of this situation?
Yeah, and one thing that I've always done ever since I started this band is because I've always had ideas for what I wanted to do for promoting our music and promoting our albums, and music video ideas for everything. And one thing I've learned I've had to do, and I'm pretty good with doing this on the fly, is like adapting. When one thing goes wrong, okay, this can't happen anymore. What's the next best thing? What's the backup? You know what I mean? And I always try and do that as much as I can. Like, the one thing that I guess I'll bring up, and I'm glad that that the album promo has been going as well as it has, because I remember at the beginning of COVID back last year in March, April, I was of the mentality that a lot of people still have, which is, I find, is a bit unfortunate, which is of, we're not promoting anything until we can do shows and tour and stuff like that. And I remember for about 6 months, we didn't do anything. Because we had a member leave and we had another member we had to let go. So it was just me. It was me and my drummer for the first few months of the pandemic, and so we spent the first 6 months not doing anything. We were still jamming because we were still working on stuff, but we were trying to find new members, which what took a long time, especially here in Ottawa, because in Ottawa there isn't there isn't a lot of musicians here who are too keen on playing power metal or melodic metal. You know what I mean? We're very much a death metal and core city, pretty much. Yeah. So I think I can only count, aside from us, there's only one other power metal band in Ottawa, and even then we're both completely different.
Wow.
Like, we're more on like the Halloween Blind Guardian sort of sense, and they're more of like the New Wabum, like Cloven Hoofy kind of stuff. But yeah, no. So, but back to what I was saying about the promotion and stuff like that, and kind of getting out of that rut was I remember when we got the new members, I remember hitting a few people up. I remember hitting you up and hitting Matt Bacon up and saying, hey, we started posting again, but no one's seeing our stuff. Like, the algorithm isn't showing our stuff to anybody, you know? We're getting only like 1% of likes and views that we were getting before, you know? And it was a really uphill battle to get back to where we are now. And I remember the one that helped me out the most was actually a previous person on your show. It was my good friend Gaia Guarda.
Yeah.
And she, I saw what she was doing with her album, and I saw how much good press she was getting, how many sales she was getting from merch and stuff like that. And I kind of asked her about it, and I thought, you know what, like, we don't know when shows are going to come back, so we might as well, you know. And I've actually found that now is actually a great time for bands to release music, because more people are online on a more consistent basis. More people have money to spend. I find that, like, more people are more forgiving and sympathetic with the bands that they like, so they'll be willing to support them in a more online as well, like buying merch online and stuff like that. And I saw that was what was happening for her, so I kind of got advice from her and you, obviously, and Matt and Curtis and our PR guy John Asher and all that, all together. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to implement all these things I've learned into promoting this album, and it's been going really well. So yeah,
I think it's interesting at the moment, because at least, I mean, what I'm seeing, at least down the arse end of the world, down here in Australia, is that we're really lucky, because we've almost gone back to normal for the most part. I mean, we're still having little outbreaks and, you know, these sort of weird restrictions that get put in place for a few days, or we might go into a little sort of temporary lockdown for a few days. But for the most part, you know, we're starting to get back to normal, and bands are starting to get back to normal. And there's a mixture. I guess it comes down to the band, really, and their circumstances. And man, like, I feel for you when you said before, you know, early last year, you know, you've lost two guys in the band. You've got yourself and the drummer, and I was looking at Metal Archives earlier just to get a bit of a grasp of sort of the, you know, the history of your band. And I'm looking, correct me if I'm wrong, but your drummer's only been in the band since 2019 as well. So really, I mean, this is your baby, man. Like, this is, I mean, I can totally understand why, you know, for a few months you didn't do anything, because you've got to regroup. You got to try and calibrate again with new people and find those people and try and get back on track. And so I think at the moment what I'm seeing is that a lot of bands, there's a mixture of real, not panic, but they want to hustle and get out there ASAP. And I think that's good if it's coming from the right place. And there's other bands that are just stuck in the headlights still, and they don't know what to do, or they want to wait until, you know, the vaccines are rolled out everywhere in the world before they start, you know, promoting themselves again. And I guess it just comes down to the band themselves as far as what they're comfortable with doing. But I think for you, just to, like you said, like, to go from having two of you guys to getting a full band again, to then getting to a point 12 months later where you're on the verge of a new release. I mean, well done, man. Like, that's a really hard thing to do, given everything that's going on, and the fact that you guys are still going through these lockdowns and still going through a lot of challenges. I mean, take that credit, mate. It's really, really good.
Thanks very much, man. I appreciate it. But yeah, it was really difficult. Like I won't get into this too much, but I will say that like that 6 months where we weren't doing anything, where all we were doing was just looking for new members, that was probably, and I kid you not, the most depressing 6 months I've ever experienced in my entire life. Like I was honestly a wreck in that 6 months because literally it's like I've obviously like kind of gotten used to it more now and adapted and kind of found new ways to do what I love to do, but it's pretty much like and I'm sure you and everyone who's listening who's a musician said that it's like literally having the one thing that gives you the most joy in life, having it like forcefully taken away from you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's one thing that it's a very depressing thought, and but as I said, that's why I appreciate like so much like the friends I've made, not only before but like during this time. Like as I said, I really appreciate people like Gaia, like you, like Curtis and Corey and all them, because they helped us out, and John, obviously, Asher, our PR guy, and even some of the other people I've gotten to know and gotten to talk to, and over this time, like Bill Hudson from North Tail and stuff like that, and a few others who, all these people have really helped me, kind of get out of that and helped me out and gave me great advice and all that stuff. So it's it's definitely been challenging. And as I said, it's in terms of the new members front, it's challenging, even though, as I said, when you live in a city where power metal isn't very popular, like whenever we have like a big band come through here, like Hammerfall or something like that, a lot of people will go. That's because it's Hammerfall, but there isn't a lot of band people here interested in playing that kind of stuff. So the guys that we got now, I feel as though, I know everyone says this about their new lineup, but this is easily the best lineup we've had so far, because it's there's no ego, there's no problems, there's no clashing personalities. We all have the same goal, we all have the same interests, we all have the same we all like to we're critical of each other. We don't sugarcoat things. We're not like we're like, as I said, and that's one thing I even told them when these new guys first joined, was I said, okay, well, just from what I've learned from some of the past members, is I said, we all have to be honest with each other. We all got to be critical of each other. If someone doesn't like something, speak up and stuff like that. And that's worked. And it's been so beneficial to us, like not just as a band, but us individually, because there's no tension, there's no nothing. You know what I mean? So
makes a big difference, and I would assume that just given that all of you, like everybody else, have had to slow down to a respect to you can't just get out there and be distracted by a whole bunch of different things. A lot of us are still at home. I think you probably had, I'm assuming, more of an opportunity to actually talk and sort of, get these things out in the open and sort of talk about, what you want and what you're hoping to get out of it. And that's probably really helped sort of, start this new chapter of the band off on the right foot.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's, just overall, it's just been really, these new guys that we've had have been really great. And even then, like as you were mentioning on Metal Archives, our drummer hasn't been with us as long, but he still feels like he's been with us for since the beginning, because we all get along so well, and we all, as I said, we all have the same goals, and we all support each other very much. So, it's just been really one thing. It's just been really refreshing and really just good. It's felt good to have bandmates who, are, we all like each other, and we all support each other very much and help each other make the music as best as it can be. Because again, I won't mention any names or throw anybody under the bus or anything, but I've had experience in the past that with a lot of former band members that they want to have there's obviously an air of ego there and stuff like that, or false pride, or they try and they're very they don't want to, people who they're always oh, it has to be my way, or it has to be a certain way, or they have to they want to sort of, it's just very contradictory behavior, and and it's not very, and it's that stuff isn't very good for a band. So that's why with these new guys, for the first time, I said, look, this is how we have to run things here. And if you guys don't like something, tell me, we can discuss it. I don't want any fights, any screaming or anything like that. You know, I just want us to be able to make the best music we can make, and all of us to support each other and be good friends. And so far that's been going really, really well. So
yeah, I think it's so important and really underrated as far as, or something that's not talked about is just making sure that communication piece is front of mind when you have anybody new joining a band, or even if you're a brand new band starting out. I mean, it's just to be able to sort of sit down and have a conversation with others and just try and align yourselves to make sure that you're all there for the same reason. And even if you're not, that's not a bad thing, as long as you know, and you can work to each other's goals to ensure that everyone's getting what they want out of this experience. And it's when everybody makes assumptions about each other that things start to go pear-shaped. And like, man, I totally can relate to all the ego stuff and all the, you know, the challenges with different personalities and different band members coming and going. It's just, I mean, incredible, like, what you have to deal with. And I think that's a lot of musicians can relate to that, because it's such a weird dynamic being in a band where ultimately you got to bring people together and have a common goal. And I think music's so emotional, and I think there's a lot of things around why people get into music as well. It might be the creative aspect, it might be the fame, it might be just pure ego that's just sort of driving those motivations, and you've got to try and get everyone together and working together to try and reach that goal, whatever that might be. So, man, I think just the fact that you guys are still chugging away and you got new music in the pipeline coming out, I think it's excellent. But one thing I was going to touch on, which I thought was quite interesting, is and you mentioned that you don't want to go into details, and it's not so much to dig into the detail, but in that space of time where you're talking about sort of really feeling depressed and sort of, you know, not great about what was going on and circumstances, you know, in those first few months of the pandemic. You told me as well that you're a manager at a rehearsal studio as well. This, I mean, for you, obviously you're getting impacted as a musician, but, you know, to work in a rehearsal studio, I assume, I mean, what was that like? I mean, did everything just get shut down and you couldn't work for a period of time as well? I mean, what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, that's pretty much, you pretty much got it right on the money there, is that we had to shut down. And we are shut down currently now, because I said we're still in a lockdown. When it first happened, we still got shut down. And one thing, and it's been, honestly, like, I know this isn't really the answer a lot of people would be expecting, but we have actually been extremely lucky for this lockdown stuff, because, you know, you have businesses closing left, right, and center. You know, we've been really, really lucky, like, because we have enough financial, we have enough money where we can keep it open even under the lockdown conditions. Like, we won't have to close permanently, because it was mainly because we have a really, really great landlord he's a really, really sweet guy, and he owns all the businesses on this one block where our business is. It's like we're actually in the upstairs of a garage of a mechanic. So there's like the mechanic business, and there's us above them. We're the rehearsal studio. Then next to that, it's like a Indian restaurant. And then next to that, it's like a dentist.
Wow.
And this guy owns all, I know, it's so weird, but this guy owns all the businesses on that block, and he pretty much told us at the beginning of this. He said, "Look, I'm not going to be an asshole and say, oh, I need all the money, I need all the rent or anything like that." He says, "No, I still need some rent because I have to live too." But he's like, he's only been charging us about a third of the rent that we were paying. And he told us, he's like, "I promise you, I'm not going to charge you full rent again until you can open at full capacity and there's no restrictions anymore." Because he's someone that he's of the mind, from what he told us. He's like, "Yeah, like this is absolute, like, this is can I swear on here?"
Yeah, of course. Go for it.
All right. Actually, this is absolute bullshit that they're doing this, you know, to small businesses and all that. So I'm not going to sit here and be greedy and all that. So he's been really great to us. And also we have a really loyal customer base that comes back every week and always supports us. And also because of that, we're lucky in the sense of we've gotten lots of aids from the government. Like we actually recently just got a $10,000 grant that we don't actually have to pay back to keep the business afloat.
No, that's cool.
Which has been great. So we actually have made enough money where we can stay afloat for a long period of time. Like, sure, not being able to go out to work sucks, and I definitely say that it's been nice, to be home and be able to, as we've talked about, promote this album. And I've also been trying to, work on improving my vocals, and I've been doing some projects with some people, like some covers here and there, doing some guest vocals for some people here and there. And it's been nice to have all the time in the world to work on that stuff. But at the same time, I do completely agree with the whole thing, especially here in Canada, where I feel bad for all these businesses who, because of all these restrictions that they've had to shut down and all that. So on my business's front, we've been honestly all right. Like, we haven't had any issues but I completely feel for all the businesses that have, and I completely sympathize and I completely agree that I'm over here, I don't want to speak for other parts of the world, but over here in Canada, and I know some people might disagree with me on this, but I'm thinking that I've always thought that are these restrictions they're putting in place, are they worth it? Because I feel like here they've, at least from what I've seen from how things are been unfolding here in Canada, that they've been doing a lot more harm than they have been good, because COVID cases in, at least where I live, have never been very high. Ottawa has never had a lot of COVID cases to begin with. Even in the summer, because last summer they opened everything up again, obviously with distancing and masks and all that stuff, but they opened up all the bars and all the restaurants again during the summer. And yeah, the cases never really went up very much, at least in Ottawa. Toronto is the main place where all of the cases and all the big crisis is happening. But every other major city in Ontario, like Ottawa, Windsor, Peterborough, a bunch of others, Hamilton, a lot of us never really got hit by COVID that badly. So that's why a lot of people, not just business owners and employees, but just people around here, are very disgruntled, because we're thinking we get why they're putting all these restrictions in, because, there's definitely COVID outbreaks in Toronto on a weekly basis, big ones. But over here we're thinking is all these restrictions really worth it? Because a lot of it has just been doing more harm than it has been good, at least in most of Ontario outside of Toronto. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a consequence of doing things like this. There's a trade-off all the time. You protect one thing and then you create risks in other ways. I mean, it's a small business thing. It's the mental health of people. It's locking people up, and I think it's just it's one of those, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't sort of situations, and you kind of got to look at it as pragmatically as you can and sort of think, all right, well, let's weigh it up and weigh up the risk, and it's a really tough thing. It's so funny, listening to you, and I think it's all relative, listening to you sort of talk about where you guys are, and I guess the severity of it compared to, say, Toronto, and just in North America in general. While you're talking, I'm looking up sort of Ottawa public health, and I'm looking to see just what it looks like in your area. And you're right. It's not high, but I mean, to give you a comparison of how sensitive we are at the moment, because we've been really lucky. We had one person outbreak. So we had no COVID cases, no new ones that were local. We had some overseas ones, but they go through hotel quarantine. So it's all contained. But we had one community transmission a week ago, I believe. And we went into, not a lockdown, but we went into restrictions in place with venues, masks, et cetera, it'll be just over a week and a half, and then they'll review it again. And that's one person in Sydney, in the largest city in the country. And so that's where we're at the moment, where it's just crazy. It's as far as but I think we're so paranoid that one person could then, end up being 50 people. It could end up being 500 people. Could end up being 1,000 people.
Yeah, like that's wild, man. Like what's the vaccination kind of situation with you guys though?
Yeah, it's a weird one. I think we've just started doing vaccinations in Australia now. I'm not sure what the rate is at the moment, but we were promised from the government that we were meant to kick off a little while ago, and there was a lot of delays. Then we changed the type of vaccination, and so the vaccine, I should say. And I think they're just starting to roll it out now. So I'm sure it's the same sort of in your part of the world, depending on your age bracket, your health. There's a bunch of all your type of work as well. If you're a frontline health worker, then you'll be sort of prioritized. So for me, I think I'm sort of, I guess it's a good thing. I'm sort of towards the end of that priority list. I'm sort of in the fifth or sixth category down the track. So eventually, at some stage later this year, I'll get a vaccine. But yeah, it's weird. I mean, I guess everyone's got their own experiences because it's hitting different parts of the world in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And and that's one thing that I found really interesting about the whole situation in different parts of the world is that, like, at least in terms of North America, I find that Canada, one thing that I've always joked about with people on that's because as you know, because you were a guest on here a little while ago, is on my live stream show on Instagram. I always I like to talk to people from different parts of the world. Like there's some guests that I get as I said, in about a week or so, I'm talking to Sara Squadrani from Ancient Bards, and they're from Italy, right? So I like to talk to different people from different parts of the world, and it's really interesting to hear like how the situation is in different parts of the world, or hell, even different parts of the country, because Canada is so divided at the moment where, like there's some provinces like Ontario and Alberta where, they're going really, really hard on the restrictions, and they're going really hard on the on everything. But then you got other places like Newfoundland, which Newfoundland, I think they're already have been open completely for a while, because Newfoundland never had, since they're so kind of closed off from the rest of the country, they didn't really have many cases to begin with. Like even at the peak, they had about at the peak of COVID for them, they maybe only had 50 cases in the city, and that's in a city of 800,000 people. So it's like, it's been really interesting to see all that, how it's been developing in different countries. Like for example, here in Canada, I just only like the other day got, eligible for a vaccine, because the vaccine rollout here compared to the States has been really that's one of the main things that's gotten people here up in arms, is that we thought, okay, like the only way, the mentality that most people have here, at least I find, are the main thing of, okay, these lockdowns, they're not really working, because the cases, even though we've been in lockdown for like a month now, the daily case number has been pretty much the same. It hasn't gone down very much. So we're thinking, okay, this obviously doesn't work. The only thing that'll work is getting more people vaccinated. But they've been taking a really long time to get people vaccinated, and to the point where we're actually looking at the states, and the states are, there's some states that are open completely, like no masks, no distancing, nothing, because enough people have been vaccinated down there. And that's one thing I joke about sometimes with the guests on my show, is I always say, like, oh, the states are. I was talking with Tait from Lords of the Trident on one of our streams, and I made a joke to him saying, like, man, as much as people criticize the states, like during the pandemic, of like, oh, they're not doing enough to combat the virus and all that stuff, and they're being irresponsible and stuff like that. I joked with them and said, the states literally had the last laugh on the whole world, because the states are like, yep, we got all the vaccines and we're gonna be the first place to open up, aside from Australia and New Zealand. They're like, yep, we have all the vaccines, we're gonna vaccinate everybody in the fastest amount of time possible, and we're going to be open everything, no distancing, nothing by the summer. And Ty kind of laughs and goes, man, that's pretty ironic now, because we always used to think this, before COVID, we always used to think the same of you guys. We're all like, oh man, Canada has it so much better than we do, but now it's kind of the opposite, you know?
Oh man, it's just it goes from one extreme to the other, and it's so interesting to see, I guess, how other parts of the world are handling it, and what people are experiencing. Because I think one thing that we've realized over the past few years is how connected we are, and for a lot of bands as well, like, you know, touring internationally has always been either something that they regularly do, or has been something on the cards that they're aspiring to do. And at the moment, I mean, one thing that we like, you know, here in Australia, what we talk amongst ourselves is that, you know, there's just no talking about going overseas anytime soon, even with the vaccines or anything like that. It's just such a huge risk, and really, I mean, it's too hard to get out of our own country and then to come back again. So for us, we're looking at sort of, okay, well, how do we really rejuvenate and kick back into a local touring circuit here in Australia, and you know, revitalize Australia as a live circuit that we can start playing again. But it's interesting to see, like, and because we're so connected with each other all over the world, just to see how people are responding and adapting. And from a musician point of view, it's really been fascinating to see how bands are trying to navigate it all. And I think one thing I did write down to talk to you about, and you mentioned it before, is the live streams that you've been doing. And I'd love to know, like, I mean, you know, you've been doing it for a little while now, and you've been speaking to a whole bunch of different people, and thanks for having me on there. What have you sort of experienced by doing this? Because have you ever done anything like this before?
Before, only once, and also anytime, man. You know, you were definitely one of the most fun guests to have on, for sure. And but one thing that I only did it once before, because I got the idea because it was around the same time when I was trying to figure out ways to promote ourselves before we announced the album. And I remember I got the idea again from Gaia, because she started doing them, and she had me on like the second episode she ever did. Like the first one she had was Curtis, and then she had me on, and I thought it was really fun. And I thought, you know what, I asked her, hey, would it be okay if I could do this myself, you know, kind of steal your idea? And she goes, oh yeah, it's no problem. And I kind of figured it'd be a good way to do it, because her audience and my audience are very different. You know what I mean? Like we'd be getting different kind of guests anyways. So I thought that, okay, you know, I'll do that. And I kind of made a list of people who I wanted to have on and stuff like that. And the whole experience doing that has been honestly, like, it's been one of the most positive things for me to come out of this pandemic, because it's just been so, like, great to learn from some people and to, like, kind of pick some people's brains and stuff like that. Like the first few weeks that I did were mainly people I knew personally. Like the first, I think, 2 or 3 weeks were people who I was just friends with, who I hadn't talked to in a while, who I thought I could get good episodes out of. You know, like I had Gaia, I had our publicist John Asher, I had was like Paul Blaze from the band Blackguard, and and like I figured I'd get really good episodes out of them. Like for example, Paul, Blackguard, they don't do as much anymore, but they were like a Canadian melodic death metal band, and I always like to hear his tour stories, because Blackguard in like the mid to late 2000s, like between 2005 and 2010, if you can name any big metal band at the time, they've probably toured with them, because they were like the perpetual opening band for a lot of these big bands, because they were on Nuclear Blast at the time, and they were like gaining all this momentum, and they're like, oh, they got to tour with you might be a bit jealous about this, knowing who you like, but they actually toured with Nevermore back when We're when We're Old Dane was still alive, and they toured with all these like big bands, stuff like that. And so a lot of these people I kind of talked to just because I wanted to catch up with them and get to know them more. But then later on, I started seeing, well, hey, maybe I could, try and get some people on who I don't know, who I just really like what they do, and I'm really like a fan of their stuff. And I've gotten to, and one thing that has been really fulfilling has been I've been getting to talk to like some of my heroes on the show. Like there's some people who I hit up who I was fully expecting them to be like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have time to do that, blah, 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 blah. But whenever some of them say yes, I'm like, what the hell? They're coming on my show? Like hell, last night I talked to one of my absolute favorite singers of all time. It was Leather Leone from Chastain. I got to talk with her, and she's like one of the sweetest ladies you'll ever meet in your life. She's so nice. And yeah, and some of these people I was like, are some of these people I've gotten to talk to, I've never even dreamed that I would be able to, get to know them on that kind of a level, before. And the live streams have definitely been one of the best things for us to come out of the pandemic, because from what I heard, people really like watching them, people really like interacting with them, and a lot of the people who we get, and as I said, I always try and get guests that not only I want to talk to, but also I think people would like to see on some of these. Like the two most successful episodes I did were both, one of them was Adrian Cowan from the band Seven Spires. And I know them because they're friends of ours, and I've been slowly going through all their members on these streams. Her, and the other one was with Lindsay Schoolcraft. And it's been really cool because these are just all people who I just wanted to get to know. Like Spires I already knew from before, obviously, but all these people who I've gotten, Leather and hell, even you as well, because I always liked Lord's work even before I met you. So it was really cool to get to know all these people on such a on a level where, hey, I can say, okay, this person is now like, I can consider this person like a colleague now, and I can hit them up and ask them for advice and ask them to like help me out with stuff, and not feel awkward about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
for sure. And it's such a great thing. Like, I experience it with the podcast as well, like being able to sort of build that connection with somebody, have an excuse to talk for more than 5 minutes at a time. Like I think it's just that little bit of that long form conversation, and just seeing where the conversation takes you, and it just helps to build that connection and that rapport. And I mean, my network's just expanded considerably over the years just due to doing the podcast. So I think no doubt you've experienced that yourself. Have you noticed that you've been able to pick up some new listeners and some new followers as a result of having all these different people on the podcast, on the live stream?
Oh, absolutely. Like one thing that I noticed is that because one of the reasons I started doing it was for that precise reason, was because I kind of see it as like sort of killing two birds with one stone, is seeing like, oh, on one hand, these are people, like I'm doing it from a place of genuineness, where these are people who I genuinely, either I'm already friends with, or I genuinely like what they do, and they seem like they're people that I think seem like they're good people that I'd want to hang out with, even outside of music and stuff like that. And they're just genuine people who I like their work and look up to them. But on the other hand, I kind of see it as an opportunity to like for each other's audience to get exposed to the other. You know what I mean? Because some of the people I've had on our show aren't even our audience, and vice versa. The person who's I'm talking to, their audience is not even close to the same as ours. So I kind of thought that it was a really good way to kind of get different audiences to be exposed to not only us, but the guests that we have on, as said, sort of like a cross promotion. So that's kind of the way I see it, is that it's kind of doing two really good, meaningful things at once.
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that I've learned over the years is that I think when you get to listen to somebody talk, or you watch a video and seeing a conversation take place, you get to understand who that person is, like their personality. And I think like it's a human thing. Like whenever you meet somebody out and about and you listen to them talk and you get a bit of an understanding or a feel of what they're like, then you tend to build connections with people. And for me, like I've discovered or have been far more open-minded to a whole range of different types of music because I've actually grown a connection to somebody and their personality, and that's actually sort of given me more of an ability to have an open mind to listen to a completely different style of music as a result. And so I think the live stream stuff's incredible because no doubt you'll have a mixture of like obviously people who are a fan of the band and yourself, but there'll be a lot of casual people coming and going who will tune in and have a listen, and as a result might be motivated to go, you know what, I might actually give this music a go because I like what this person's saying. I like their personality. They seem like a really cool person. So I might spend 10 seconds listening to the start of a song.
Yeah, and it's been the same thing with me personally, like being a bit more open-minded to different kinds of music. Because one thing I will say is that some of the guests I've had on the show actually weren't planned. Some of them were actually kind of spontaneous. Like, for example, one thing that people would know about me is that if anyone knows me personally is that I'm not really a fan of core music. Like I'm not really a fan of like metalcore, deathcore, stuff like that. It's not my thing. But I've had a couple of people from those kinds of bands on the show before, and it was mainly like really organic. Like for example, a while ago I had two of the guys from the band Arrival of Autumn on the show, and they were they're like a sort of metalcore melodic death metal band from Alberta, and I only got them on because they showed up in the chat for one of the other streams, and I said, "Oh, I've heard of them before," and I'm like, "Oh, they're on Nuclear Blast. That's sweet, you know." Blah 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 blah. And so I hit them up, and they were more than happy to do it. And then when I got to know these guys, I thought these guys are absolutely delightful human beings, and their music is fantastic. You know, after listening to it, like it's from a genre that I'm not into, but the way they do it, I'm like, yeah, I genuinely like this. I would, you know, buy these guys merch and listen to their stuff on my own time and stuff like that, you know? So I do agree that some of the guests that I get are some people who as I said, would be exposing like different genres to each other and different audiences to each other. And I think that's like the beauty of the whole thing, I find, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I think the more that we sort of connect with each other, the more open-minded we are to give, and just even if it's a respect thing, but it's also just an appreciation of what people put into their craft, into their music. I mean, even just, you know, going back to what you said earlier about sort of where you guys were as a band, you know, early last year and having to regroup and find new people and just all those stories of struggle and challenge and just having to sort of, you know, your back's against the wall to an extent where you've got to regroup again. And I think a lot of bands, regardless of the style of music that they play, they can identify with that. And I think the more that we sort of, you know, listen to each other talk and converse, I think then we're far more open-minded. I always find, like, you know, I'll pick up a CD now and listen to it, and because I've had a chat with a band member, and I've heard their story, that I'm listening to their music in just such a different light and a different level of appreciation, and just this depth that I didn't have last time I listened to that music. And so it's just it's so underrated, and I think it comes back to like the old pre-COVID days of networking and going to shows and just interacting with people and just always being willing to say hello and learn and be curious about other people. I think it's such a massive benefit and advantage to sort of have that sort of mindset and always be willing to break out of your own inner circle of you know, like-minded people, or the people that are playing the same sort of music as you are, or liking the same sort of music, and just willing to have a chat and see where that conversation takes you.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I found that it's starting to happen more and more in metal music, and I'm really happy about it, is that because I've always been someone that, even though my main genre I love playing is power metal and old school metal, you know, like that's where my heart is in this genre, in this vast genre of metal music. One thing that I've been seeing less and less of, which when I first came into metal music, I found that it was really, really, really clicky. You know what I mean? Like it was like, oh, if you listen to this genre, you didn't listen to this other subgenre. You know, if you listen to like thrash metal, you're not going to listen to freaking glam metal and stuff like that. Or if you listen to black metal, then you're not going to listen to this, blah, blah, blah. And I've never liked that, because I'm someone who, I've always said to people, and some people find this, they're like, huh, what? I'm like, yeah, I will literally listen to a Bathory song and then literally listen to an Amaranth song right after it. You know what I mean? and I see some people, like some parts of the scene, who they're all bashing all these kinds of bands. They're all like, oh, Amaranth are too poppy, you know, or this band plays fucking 7 strings, fuck them, you know. And I'm just thinking, why? Like, what's wrong with that? You know, there's nothing. And it's funny because, and this goes to show how much I think I've grown as a person, because I used to be like that. when I was in high school, I was like a thrash kid. I was like, yep, Megadeth, Overkill, every other sissy genre can fuck off. But now I'm like, man, I love glam metal. I actually like it more than thrash now, to be honest. And yeah, as I said, I'll listen to if I'm listening to, like, I have such a weird taste. As I said, I'll listen to Running Wild, and then I'll listen to Winger, and then I'll listen to Amaranth, and then I'll listen to freaking Nocturnus, you know? And I'm thinking, and I'm seeing more and more people now like that, which I think is great, because I'm thinking, you know, like, why do we have to be in, like, why can't we all, like, you know, like, appreciate each other's art and learn from it? Because I've seen lots of newer bands incorporate different genres into their music seamlessly and do it in a way that doesn't feel forced. Like, the one that I always point to for that is Seven Spires. Like, they're probably my favorite kind of newer band out there now, and a lot of their music is literally just combining different metal subgenres and doing it in a way that doesn't feel forced. Like, they have one song that's my favorite song from them. It's called The Cabaret of Dreams, and it's literally a song where they mixed power metal, black metal, like Dimmu Borgir style black metal, and swing music all in the same song. And it sounds good. It's not forced or anything. And I'm seeing more and more of these new bands doing all this really new stuff, this really interesting stuff musically, that, you know, a lot of the older metal heads are all like, oh, that's so stupid, that's not metal, you know. And I'm thinking, well, you know, like, you guys, people, but I'm like, yeah, but also people, a lot of the older metalheads also always like to say, oh, metal's been done, nothing's original anymore. And, like, even though that's debatable, I find that a lot of what's making music, metal music, at least original now, is a lot of these bands combining all these elements into making something that's their own. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to, like, I find nowadays you don't have to do something that's necessarily new, but you have to do something that, like, makes you stand out and makes it, like, something that, like, people wouldn't expect. Like, as I said, like, if you'd seen, like, one thing that I hear a lot of now is, like, with bands like, you know, Unleash the Archers and stuff like that, is people used to think, oh, power metal shouldn't have growls in it, you know? And I'm like, well, it when it's placed there correctly, it works, you know? Like, yes, like, I agree, power metal, the vocal should most of the time be clean, but, you know, there's nothing wrong with having a little bit of a difference, little something different, you know, in there as well, you know? So I'm really glad that a lot of people are starting to kind of get that mentality now and get the idea of, you know, you can still be like, in terms of heavy metal nowadays, you don't have to confine yourself to, like, oh, we're only going to play just this genre or just this genre, you know. No, like, you obviously have to have a core genre, you know, for, like, marketing reasons and all that, but you can add stuff to it to make it unique and cool, you know. And a lot of bands have been doing that, and and that's been something I've been seeing more people turn around to and more people grow to appreciate.
Yeah, I think it boils down to whether you can actually write a good song or not. And you know, there's plenty of bands out there that are playing very, very traditional death metal or traditional black metal or traditional power metal or whatever it might be, as far as what it's stereotypically been for so many years, but it sounds like shit because they can't write a good song, you know. So it doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't matter whether you're mixing genres together or you're just playing, you know, something that's very stereotypically traditional of what you would expect of that subgenre of metal or any sort of music. If you can't write the song, then it doesn't matter. It sounds like crap no matter what. So I think, as you said, it comes down to how it's executed, and there's some really there's some amazing stuff out there where people have executed it really well. It's really well crafted, and they put all these amazing elements into a song. And as you said, like, you know, examples where it's not forced. It's been done with the right intention and the right care, that you're not feeling like you're being punished by listening to this forced sort of, you know, this mash of just rubbish that's being thrown at you. Because I guess you can throw all these elements together, but if you don't know how to do it properly, then it's going to sound like crap no matter what. So I think it just comes down to the talent of the artist and the band to be able to sort of just craft a good song.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as a perfect example of that, I'm gonna throw a bit of flattery your way, but on your guys' album on Fallen Idols, my favorite track on that whole album is Counting Down the Hours, and that's the most different song on the album, because all your guys' stuff is very, you know, is very like, you know, just like heavy power metal, you know, but then you got this song, which is like, you could hear this song in like an 80s movie, you know. It's almost like it's almost like who's the guy who sang? Oh, Stan Bush. It's like a heavy Stan Bush song, you know. But I think the main important thing is in that whole argument, in that whole thing, is you have to make the music still sound like you. Like, as you say, it's songcraft. Like, even though that song was very different, it still sounded like Lord, you know?
Yeah.
So I find that that's the most important thing, is that, like, when you're in a band, you gotta find a way to, like, with the songwriting, that even if you're having all these different elements into the song to make the overall thing be unique, you still have to make it sound like you know, you still have to make it sound like yourself, you know? So,
and then like, it's a lot of the bands that, you know, we've seen over the years that go through these changes in their sound because, you know, they're trying to capitalize on a larger audience, you know, might want to try and, you know, go down a path of getting some mainstream recognition, and they sacrifice the ethos of the band because they're trying to chase something that's not, it's artificial, it's not who they are. And you end up seeing those bands, you know, do a 180 and come back, you know, or, you know, make a dramatic turn and start to come back to what they were doing before, because they realize that they've you know, gone off on a path that they shouldn't have been doing in the first place. So yeah, 100% correct, man. Like, you can do whatever you want. Like, you know, it's up to you what you want to put out there, but it's got to be you. It's got to be your sound. It's got to have your stamp on it. Otherwise, it's just going to come across as artificial and disingenuous, and people are just not going to identify with it. People aren't going to stick around.
Yeah, and people can see through that very easily, you know. And the thing I always say, and this is the kind of my philosophy with the whole songwriting thing, and I'm sure this is a lot of other bands as well, is that my earliest musical influence, the band that made me want to become a musician, as I'm sure a lot of other people, was Queen. And Queen is the best example of, even though they're not necessarily metal, Queen is one of those bands where they were like, they never wrote the same song twice, but every song sounded like Queen. You know what I mean? So that's what I kind of want. That's kind of my philosophy of, like, you don't have to write songs that sound the same over and over. You can write different stuff, but you have to still, in the songwriting, try and make it sound like you. I think that's the most important part. Like, because one thing that this is a bit of a mini rant that I have, is that one thing I always see, and I don't like it personally in metal scene, is that whenever I see I've seen many reviews where they've said, this album is great, the band's really consistent, but they use the word consistent incorrectly, though, because I find that I'll listen to the same album and I'll think, every song on here sounds the same, you know, they're not doing anything different, you know. So I find that, like, more bands should do that. You should be right. I find that more bands should be writing trying to never write the same song twice, and while still making it sound like them, like their signature kind of aura, if you will. So that's kind of like so I feel like that's the way that a lot of people should go. Personally, that's what I think personally.
No, I agree, and I think if you're a new listener to a band, like you discover a band and you don't know where to start, and obviously you're going to hear dramatically different sounds depending on the era that you start with a band. If you're talking about a band that's been around for a long time, but ultimately, I mean, what I would think the goal would be is that you could start at 15 years ago or 20 years ago, or you could start at the most recent release, and you should be able to still identify that it's the same band that you're listening to. There should be that sound, or those trademarks that are part of your identity. It's your voice, it's your sound. That it doesn't matter. And I think Queen's a great example. Like, there's just so many weird different directions they went in over the years. They redefined themselves constantly, but you can listen to any song, even if you don't know if you only know the hits, but then someone gave you a deep cut off like a random album from like the 80s or the 70s or whatever, you would go, oh, that's Queen, isn't it? Like, you'd know straight away, because it's got those elements of who they are. It's their DNA's in everything that they do. And I think that should be a goal of a lot of bands, in my opinion, is that, go off on all these different tangents, experiment, do all these crazy things and have fun, but keep the DNA there so people have got some kind of starting point so they can identify and go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that to add on to that, and just kind of to go back to something you were saying earlier, is that because you were saying that a lot of bands, and I don't really find this happens that much anymore, but like back in the day, you have all these bands go in completely different creative directions in terms of to seek out fame or a different audience, and it usually kind of backfires and stuff like that. And it's funny you brought that up, because on my show last night with Leather, Leon and I were talking about the exact same thing, because she was saying how because one thing I commented about her when I was talking with her on the show is that she's one of the few really older generation metalheads who really embraces a lot of the younger bands who are doing stuff that's different. Because I've seen lots of and again, I'm not hating on the older generation, because again, I love a lot of the music that they make, but I find a lot of the really jaded kind of people who kind of older metalheads who are kind of bitter with the industry and all that stuff. I find that they always throw shade at a lot of what the newer bands are doing. But Leather, she was telling me how she was saying, yeah, as I brought the same thing up to her, I said, hey, yeah, I think that a lot of bands should be trying to write different stuff and trying to write different, try and go in different directions while still sounding like themselves. And she goes, oh yeah, I totally agree. She's like, that is something I literally wanted to do in the 80s, but the record company wouldn't let me. She was oh no, she was going on about how she said she wanted to have almost a full-on extreme metal record. She said she wanted to do a full-on extreme metal record, and they said, and the record company's like, no, that's because this is back when all the chicks in metal all had to be the same, they all had to be all dolled up and look pretty for everybody, and then they're like, nope, you have to do this, and you have to try. And she even told me one story when they tried one time to tell her how to dress, and she pretty much just told them to fuck off because she was like, around the same time, all the bands not. She's like, I love Vixen and I love all those bands like that, but that's not me. I'm not a girly girl, I'm just like you. I'm like a tomboy who likes to dress in jeans and leather and spandex, at least back in the day. And yeah, and she said she's like, that was a huge thing that she was saying that was a huge thing that was a problem for me back then, was I wanted to do different stuff, but a lot of times the record company wouldn't let me, because they'd be like, yeah, this is the kind of music you play, this is what you look like, you're not straying from this. And she even said, she's like, yeah, I found that led and actually no, not she didn't say this, I said this, and I said to her, yeah, and I found that that mentality kind of led to a lot of really boring records, like, yeah, like I've heard a lot of boring records, and it's great to even see some of the older bands now kind of embracing that whole mentality as well and doing stuff like, just to go back to Leather, her newest album, Leather 2, is much heavier than any of the other stuff she's done before, So I'm really glad to see that, as I said, that whole mentality and that whole philosophy is becoming more prevalent.
Yeah, definitely. I think, the complete upheaval of the music industry and removing gatekeepers and musicians being more empowered and learning new skills and being able to interact and connect with people all over the world, it opens up the ability to be open-minded and to experiment and not have anybody stop you. And if anything, the only consequence that you're going to have with trying different things is just the response, whether people are going to like it or not, and that's all that you should ever have to worry about. And if anything, not even have to really worry about it, because if you love doing it, then you just do it. So yeah, man, it's definitely, I mean, it's certainly an exciting time, and I love talking to people that were around, and active in the sort of late 80s, early 90s, and just sort of talking or their observations now compared to then, because obviously it's a drastically different world that we live in, and especially when it comes to the music industry. But man, thank you so much for the chat. Like, it's been so good to talk to you. But I think first things first, or last things last, I should say. I mean, we could just keep talking. Wolfpack. So the live stream. So just if anyone's keen and wants to check that out, what time is that usually happening?
The times vary, but they're always on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. On our every week, we do them 3 times a week. It's always Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The times vary because I talk to different people in different parts of the world. So if I'm talking to someone and I'm purely talking to North American people, but if I'm talking to someone in Europe, it'll be more likely it'll be during the day. But if I'm talking to someone from, let's say, California or something, then it'll most likely be later at night. But it'll always be Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the live streams.
Oh man, you're a workhorse. I can't believe it. Like, that's just insane. I'm doing 2 podcasts a week and I'm exhausted. You're doing 3 live streams as well. It's another dynamic altogether. So well done, mate. I'll put a link in. And
thanks, man.
The upcoming new album. So Mark of the Wolf. That's out on the 4th of June.
Yeah, it's going to be out. I'll just kind of clarify this, because even though in the advertising is that it's going to be out 4th of June digitally.
Yep.
For people who have pre-ordered physical stuff, you'll be getting that sort of later on, like probably later on in the month, because, COVID delays and our label is in a completely different country. So they have to send us all that stuff, so... But it'll be out for people to listen to online June 4th.
That's excellent. Yeah, cool. Looking forward to it, man. Dude, thank you so much. Thanks for the awesome chat.
Oh man, thanks so much for having me, man. As I said, I've followed your show for a long time, and I've been a big fan. So it's been awesome to come on here and shoot the shit with you and stuff like that, and have some really meaningful discussion and stuff like that. So I appreciate it.
All right, if you like what you heard, go and check out the latest single, Crucible, on the streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, etc. Go to Bandcamp, so lycanthro.bandcamp.com or lycanthro.bigcartel.com. Go and pre-order the upcoming new album, Mark of the Wolf, that's out on the 4th of June. And reach out to James and let him know what you thought of this chat. Great guy, great band, and really excited to see how the new album goes for the guys. Now, before we wrap it up, of course, patreon.com/Andy Dowling. It is the best way to support this podcast, of course. And you know what I'm going to say. Support starts from only $1 a month. Set and forget. You won't even notice it. It just comes out of your bank account every month, and it's just $1. It's just $1. And if you want access to the additional tiers where you get the Patreon podcast episode that comes out every Tuesday, or some free shit, giveaways, all sorts of stuff, there are additional tiers there to support the podcast. But I must do a little thank you, little shout out to my top tier supporters over at Patreon. These guys are the heavy lifters for what I do, backing me and the podcast, are just absolutely amazing contributors, throw a hell of a lot of money at me each month, and it means the world to me. So thank you so much to Andrew from Perth, Mick G from Sydney, Ash from Deniliquin, Dan from Dapto, Rod from Rayleigh in North Carolina, Patrick from Canberra, Liam from Brisbane, Chris from Sydney, Brendo from Leeton, Tim from Canberra, James from Brisbane, Christian from Canberra, Steve from the Gold Coast, and Andrew from Sydney. Guys, thank you so much. And these legends are part of the wider team of just incredible, awesome, legendary, good people that are over at Patreon supporting me. So go and check it all out over at patreon.com/Andy Dowling. Now, next episode, who knows? I should know. I wrote it down somewhere and then I lost a piece of paper and I can't remember off the top of my head. So it'll be a surprise as always. But thanks so much for supporting. Please, if Patreon's not your thing, just sharing these episodes around, dig into the back catalogue. There is 290 bloody 3 other episodes to go and check out. Lots of people from all walks of life, not just music, but comedy, the arts, science, just all sorts of stuff. There's heaps of things there. You guys know what I'm talking about. So go back, dig into it, reach out to those guests, let them know what you thought. Go and give the podcast a bit of social media love, all that usual call to action shit. So anyway, let's wrap it up. Thank you so much. Until next week, take care and ta-ta.